I get asked this a lot over the years, especially since I'm an instructor but also a coach. How do I train myself? How do I optimize myself so that I continue to grow but also stay in shape? How do I do that? And I gotta say that this is something that's very important to me, very near and dear to me, and I call it the Estocada Method simply because it's not as simple as somebody else's method. Meaning, if I give you a book and say, well, this is how I like to train, but that's not the complete picture. Or I point you to someone else and I say, I kind of train like that, but that's not the complete picture as well. So about a good 7 years ago, I started to put something together and just said, you know what, this is how I'm gonna train myself, use myself as a use case and just say, hey, this is how I like to train myself and these are the results that I happen to get. In many ways, the goal of all of this, at least for me, is to really cultivate and strengthen this great sense of inner peace, meaning the ability to reconcile every part of myself so that there is less and less conflict within myself. God forbid, there's so many conflicts in this world that it is important for us to not be a part of that conflict and to allow that conflict within us. So what I like to do with my Estocada method as a goal is to bring myself closer and closer to that inner calm and that inner peace, which is, in my opinion, the primordial state of all human beings. An elevated sense of awareness with a cultivated sense of inner peace. So, how do I do it? There are 3 buckets where I like to say that my physical fitness, which is the foundation of my inner peace, is categorized. On this bucket happens to be loaded training. And loaded training has a lot to do with that inner peace and that inner calm. One, because since I like to use barbells, kettlebells, and clubbells, it improves on a physiological level my lean body mass and my bone density. Elevated levels of natural testosterone is one of those key indicators to ensure that you're healthy. And when those levels of testosterone start to go down, that's when you start to see a lot of dis-ease and a lot of unhealthy factors. Make sure you look it up. It is important to me that when I do my loaded training, those are the key physiological factors that I look for in terms of my health. In terms of fitness and my martial performance, I think it's relatively obvious that having a very good basis in general physical preparedness ensures that worst case scenario, I have my strength and conditioning to support me. So if I have to run or if I have to push, do some sort of gross motor movement, it's something that I can do. And on top of that, those are the attributes that support all of my techniques. That's one of the things that I like to emphasize, especially in my Estocada method. You have to be an athlete. I think that if you're going to pick up a sword, a knife, or a stick, I don't think you want to be that martial artist who's practically useless without it. It's one of those key lines in that movie, Yojimbo, where Toshiro Mifune's character had been beaten up and then one of the guys who beat him up and captured him said, hey, isn't he a little dangerous, because he's starting to wake up. And one of the lines that the bodyguard said is, that guy is nothing without his sword. Oh, that is brutal. Don't be that guy. Don't be that martial artist or that samurai who's useless without his sword and his knife. And that's where loaded training comes in. Remember to stay healthy. I like to stay healthy so that my hormone levels are good, my lean body mass and my bone density is good. So as I age, I'm still very physically capable. But also, in case I don't have my knife or my sword or my tomahawk, I'm pretty capable of handling myself. Second bucket that I like to focus on is cardiovascular training, which is different from endurance training. Endurance training is when you're sweating and breathing hard and just when you're trying to choke the guy and you have 30 seconds left. That's not cardiovascular training. That's endurance training. Just because you can endure doesn't mean you're cardiovascularly healthy. Cardiovascular health has very specific biomarkers that upon which it is judged by. One of them is resting heart rate, the other one is HRV. Among other things, talking about cardiovascular health, that we are decoupling it from conditioning and endurance because those are 2 different things. Some martial artists like to think that I'm going to go to Muay Thai, that way I can get my cardio. I'm going to go to Jiu-Jitsu and get my cardio. That's not really cardio. You're just doing some sport-specific conditioning. Cardio is when you are training so that your heart benefits from it because your heart is a muscle. So you're doing some form of steady state. Maybe your heart rate is somewhere between 80 and 120 beats per minute. That way your heart starts to become healthy, starts really nice and expansive. Other one is sprinting protocols. So your heart rate is a little higher, maybe a little closer to 160, 170. That promotes arterial health. So that nice mix of high intensity sprints and steady state training protocols ensures that your heart has these nice expansive eccentric contraction qualities, but also so that your arteries are nice and clean and ready to go when you're doing your sprints. So when I do that, I like to use kettlebells. I like to sprint with my kettlebells, meaning I do 500 swings, maybe 10, 20 at a time, and make sure that my heart rate is nice and elevated. But sometimes I also like to do this by mixing in some sort of weapons training, whether it's a balisong drill or a ginunting drill or a tomahawk drill, so that when I'm training in those elevated zones or in those lower zones. The third one happens to be motor control training. And motor control training, as far as I'm concerned, is one of those very important protocols because that to me is what is most connected to anti-aging and longevity. Because when you're working with weapons, one of the things that it does is it improves your grip. But also number two, it improves motor control complexity, meaning you're moving through all of the planes of human movement, your frontal plane, sagittal plane, and transverse plane. So when you're moving in this way, it allows your nervous system and your brain to work together to ensure that everything is synchronized and nice and easy so that it's really nice and smooth. This is one of the main reasons why you don't necessarily see me doing partner drills or sparring drills, because those are more skill specific. They're not necessarily health oriented. I'm not training weapons necessarily because I think that my life is in danger. I don't think my life is in danger at all. I don't do any of these weapons training because I think that one of these days I'm gonna get jumped by a whole bunch of bad guys. I need my sword and knife to fight them all off. Well, maybe a zombie horde one of these days, you'll never know. But the idea being, I don't walk around thinking that my life is in danger. I train with swords and weapons in a very classical way. The way that some of the ancient swordsmen, specifically on the Filipino end, but also on the Japanese end, worked with their weapons. They did it so that they could integrate with the tool, so that it was something that would actually give back to them. This is where I really feel strongly about Yagyu Munenori, who believed that the sword had life-giving capabilities, where in the training of the sword itself, it raises our level of awareness from a kinesthetic standpoint. I have a better sense of my footwork, a better sense of foot-ankle complex in terms of how my foot positioning is. It also helps me understand lumbo-pelvic rhythm so that I understand if I'm standing a certain way, in order for me to engage my core, I have to tilt my hip a certain way. This level of high-level motor control awareness is the actual attribute that I'm trying to develop, because when I have all of that motor complexity to keep my brain and nervous system engaged, it also raises my level of kinesthetic awareness so that when I am in front of a training partner or a sparring partner or, God forbid, an opponent, my focus is not on the opponent. There is no such thing as an opponent. Only the purity of my technique. When I do all of these three buckets as part of my daily routine, it allows me to focus on perfecting myself. So when you see me working with all of these weapons, I'm not feeling any violence. I'm not feeling any hatred or any anger. There's only this cool, calm reserve where I feel like I am at one with the movement, I am at one with the tool, I am at one with everything that is around me. It is really a magnificent feeling that I really encourage you to explore, because no matter what happens, I know I have an art to sustain me. I know that I have a sword or a knife or a tomahawk that once I practice, my body, my mind, and my spirit is fully integrated in the now. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope that you take my advice to heart, that training in this method, this elevated sense of health and self-awareness, in my opinion, is the way to go as far as your martial training for longevity is concerned. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me on the email below. I would love to connect with you on this and talk to you more about how this way of training has brought me a lot of benefits as it relates to my body, my mind, and my spirit. Thank you for letting me share. I hope you enjoyed this video.